They are angels of God, known as cherubim and seraphim, which are the winged angelic attendants on God as he is seated upon a throne high and exalted. This scene of glory and splendor takes place not on earth, but in heaven at the very throne of God. The court is seated. This is the highest court in the universe from which there is no appeal. So in answer to our question of where does the judgment take place, we find the answer is in heaven, not on earth. But friend, you might rightly ask another question. When does this judgment take place? We noted that the first angel of Revelation 14 declares that the hour of God's judgment has come. Now, is this message before or after the second coming? Now, friend, we've seen it's before. I want you to listen very attentively to this important observation. If the judgment has already started before the second coming, and if the signs of the times tell us the second coming is near, could it be that the judgment in heaven has already begun? Could it be that when Christ descends, the judgment will have already finished, and those that are resurrected and caught up to meet Christ in the air have been declared in the judgment righteous through Jesus? They've been saved by the blood of the Lamb. Could it be that those who are destroyed by the brightness of Christ's coming, those who are ultimately and eternally lost, have had their fate decided by their own choices as revealed in the opening of the books? Does Daniel tell us when the judgment takes place? In Daniel 8 verse 14 we read something amazing, something incredible. Daniel 8 verse 14 reads, "For 2,300 days, then the sanctuary shall be cleansed." Now there are two things here, friend. First, a time period, and the time period is 2,300 days. And the event? Then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Now this term, the sanctuary shall be cleansed, may be a little difficult for us to understand. It was not difficult at all for Daniel to understand, because Daniel was a Jew and lived in the days of the Old Testament sanctuary. Now, what does the cleansing of the sanctuary mean? Now, let's go back to the Old Testament sanctuary and find out what this cleansing of the sanctuary meant. You will remember God said to Moses in Exodus 25 verse 8, "Let them make me a sanctuary, that I might dwell among them." Now, you and I looked at the sanctuary just a little the other day when we looked at Revelation's Lamb, Jesus Christ, to whom all the Old Testament sacrifices pointed. The sanctuary was divided into two parts, the outer court and the tent-like structure called the tabernacle. In that outer court, there was an altar of burnt offering. And the tent-like structure was divided into two parts, the holy place and the most holy place. Now, if a man or a woman living in the Old Testament times committed a sin, if he or she got angry or stole something or lied or lusted, he or she would get a lamb and bring that lamb to the sanctuary. The lamb must be without spot and without blemish. He would confess his sin over the head of the lamb, and the sinner's guilt was symbolically transferred to the perfect lamb. Now the wages of sin are death, and the lamb died in place of the sinner. And the perfect lamb was slain, and its blood caught up in a basin. The lamb's body would be put on the altar in the court, and this pointed forward to the time Christ's body would be offered on Calvary's cross. Now after the animal was slain, the priest would leave the court and take the blood into the sanctuary. The priest would bring the blood of the sacrifice before the veil that separated the first and second apartments in the sanctuary and sprinkle it there. Now, what did this daily service in the sanctuary represent? Christ died on the cross, but after his death he was resurrected and ascended to heaven. And today Jesus offers the merits of his blood in heaven on our behalf. Jesus is the Lamb that died for us, and Jesus is the high priest who lives for us now. In heaven's sanctuary he says, "This man is one of mine, I pardon him, I forgive him. I pardon her, I forgive her." The priests did not go into the second apartment every day. Only once a year did the high priest, and only the high priest, enter into the most holy place of the earthly sanctuary. And there in the most holy place of the earthly sanctuary was a piece of furniture called the Ark of the Covenant, representing God's throne. And inside it was the 10 Commandment law. And above was the mercy seat, with 2 golden angels representing the angels around God's throne. Between the angels was the Shekinah glory, representing the very presence of God. And when the high priest went into the sanctuary once a year, it was called the Day of Atonement. Now the word means at 1 mint. It was a day of judgment. It was also called the day of the cleansing of the sanctuary. And on this, the most important day of the Jewish calendar, the high priest went into the most sacred part of the temple, before the Ark of the Covenant, which represented the throne of God.